Last episode, we saw that deliberate attention is costly and depletes. Today, we look at what that means for every goal you have set and not kept. You set a goal. You meant it. You kept it for a while. Then something happened, not a dramatic failure, just a quiet drift, and the goal slowly became something you used to do. You probably blamed yourself. You probably used the word willpower. Here is what the research actually shows. The people who succeed most reliably at long-term goals are not the ones who resist temptation more often. They are the ones who arrange their lives so temptation arrives less often. That one shift changes everything about how you approach a goal. Let us look at exactly how it works. This is MindScope, where we turn the science of everyday behavior into tools you can actually use. Today, the topic is self-control, but not the version you probably learned. Not grit, not discipline, not trying harder. We are looking at the evidence on what self-control actually is, why it runs out, and how the people who seem to have the most of it have built something far more durable than willpower. By the end of this episode, you will understand why willpower depletes, what ecological research on self-control in daily life actually found, what nudge theory tells us about defaults and friction, and 2 concrete moves you can make today. 1 adds friction to something you want to do less. 1 removes friction from something you want to do more. Start with the most important thing to understand about willpower. It is finite. In a series of controlled experiments beginning in the late 1990s, Roy Baumeister and his colleagues demonstrated that self-regulatory effort draws on a limited resource that becomes depleted with use. They called this egodepletion. The basic finding was this: people who had already exerted self-control on one task, resisting a temptation, suppressing a response, persisting at a difficult problem, subsequently performed worse on a completely unrelated self-control task. The resource crossed tasks. Using it once made it harder to use again. Subsequent research has complicated and refined this picture. There has been debate about the size of the effect and whether glucose is literally the resource being depleted, as was initially proposed. But the core observation has held up in many forms. Self-regulatory effort is not unlimited, and it does not refill instantly. Relying on willpower as your primary strategy means depending on a resource that is highest in the morning, lowest when you are hungry or tired or stressed, and gone entirely after a long day of difficult decisions and resisted impulses. This is worth sitting with, because most goal-setting advice implicitly assumes that more effort is available if you just want it badly enough. The research says something more honest. You have a budget. Every act of resistance spends from it. And the way to make a budget last is not to spend harder. It is to spend less often. Here is the finding that reframes everything. In a study by Wilhelm Hoffman and colleagues, published in 2012, researchers used ecological momentary assessment, which is a method of contacting participants at random points throughout their day and asking them what they are experiencing right now, to track self-control in real daily life. Over a week, more than 200 adults reported on their desires, their conflicts, and whether they resisted or gave in. The finding that stands out is not about resistance. It is about temptation. People who scored higher on trait self-control reported experiencing fewer temptations, not more successful resistance. They were not white-knuckling it through more difficult moments than everyone else. They were simply encountering fewer of those moments. They had arranged their lives in ways that reduced how often they needed to exercise willpower at all. This is a genuinely important reframe. We tend to picture self-control as a battle, desire on one side, resistance on the other, and strong character winning the fight. The ecological data suggests something quieter and more practical. Strong self-control looks less like combat and more like good environmental housekeeping. The battle is mostly avoided by the person who never set up the battlefield in the first place. Hold that image, because the next question is obvious. If the environment is doing the work, how does it work? That is where nudge theory comes in. In 2008, behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein brought together years of research on how small, often invisible features of the environment shape behavior without restricting choice. The central insight is that there is no such thing as a neutral choice architecture. Every time you encounter a decision, someone or something has already designed the environment that frames it. That design determines the default. What happens if you do nothing? It determines friction, how much effort the choice requires. And defaults and friction are powerful behavioral levers precisely Because most behavior follows the path of least resistance. The classic demonstration comes from retirement savings. When employees were automatically enrolled in a savings plan and had to opt out rather than opt in, participation rates jumped dramatically. The same plan, the same employees, entirely different behavior. Because the default changed, not the person. The same principle applies to your personal goals at every scale. If the vegetables are at the front of the refrigerator and the snacks are at the back, the default changes. If your running shoes are by the door, the friction on going for a run drops. If your phone is in another room at night, the friction on checking it in bed goes up. None of these moves require willpower in the moment. The choice was made earlier, when willpower was available and the temptation was not present. The environment then carries the decision forward. You are always living inside a choice architecture. The question is whether you designed it deliberately or whether it accumulated by accident. Here are the two tools that follow directly from everything above. They are simple because the principle is simple. Reduce temptation at the point of design, not at the point of desire. The first move is adding friction to one behavior you want to do less often. Think about the behavior that most regularly undermines a goal you care about. Now ask where in your environment that behavior is made easy. Is the thing one tap away? Is it the first thing you see? Is the path to it frictionless? Your job is to add one step. Move the thing. Put it behind something else. Log out instead of staying logged in. Make the behavior require one more action than it currently does. This does not block the behavior. A motivated person will still do it. But when you are tired, stressed, or running on an emptied willpower budget, one extra step is often enough to interrupt the automaticity and give you a moment of choice. The second move is removing friction from one behavior you want to do more often. Pick one goal-aligned habit that you want to make more regular. Now ask where the friction is. What makes this harder than the competing behavior? Lay the thing out the night before. Keep the tool on the counter, not in the drawer. Open the document before you close the laptop. Pre-decide the time and the place. Lower the cost of entry so that starting requires almost no decision at all. These moves work not because they change who you are, but because they change what the path of least resistance leads to. The environment becomes an ally instead of an obstacle. If you find that even environment design is not enough, and that urges or patterns are significantly affecting your well-being or your functioning, that is worth talking through with a mental health professional. Psychologists and behavioral therapists have tools for exactly this. Here is the whole episode in one breath. Willpower is a depletable resource. Relying on it as your primary strategy means you will always be working against a deficit by the time you most need it. The people who show the most consistent self-control in daily life are not resisting more often. They are encountering temptation less often because they have designed their environments to face it less. Defaults and friction are the levers. Change the default, and the behavior follows without a fight. Add friction to what you want less of. Remove friction from what you want more of. Do this once, with intention, and the environment does the work from there. Today, pick one thing. One behavior to add friction to, or one behavior to remove friction from. Make the change before the next time the situation arises, when you have the space and the willpower to design, rather than in the moment when both are low. If this shifted how you think about goals and self-control, consider subscribing, because the next episode builds directly on this one. We are going to look at decision fatigue, why the number of decisions you make in a day quietly degrades the quality of each one, and what to do about it. One question for the comments before you go. Think about one goal you care about that you keep not keeping. Where in your environment is the temptation made easy? I would genuinely like to hear what you notice. Drop it below. I will see you in the next one.